Alright everyone, we start off today because it's January 6th with pointing out that last year on January 6th, the protest that devolved into a riot there, no, that wasn't an insurrection. Insurrection is when people were attempting to burn most of DC to the ground the prior year, or I think the year before that, when Trump was president, to the point where the president had to hunker in the bunker because there were people outside attacking the Secret Service. I don't see a Remembrance Day for that. In fact, I couldn't even tell you what day that happened on. An insurrection is what happened in Afghanistan after Biden screwed up the withdrawal. An insurrection is what appears to be happening right now in Kazakhstan, although some people are saying the glowing ones are doing it's the CIA. Other people are saying the Russians are attempting to exert more control. Who knows? It could really just be about petroleum price increases, and I don't care. But January 6th for me is really more Ashli Babbitt Remembrance Day. First, feeling pity for the family, you know, their relative is killed. Secondly, because it's actually a miracle. She should be canonized. This should be recognized by the Catholic Church, I suppose, as a miraculous event. An unarmed person, a female no less, was shot by a cop while engaged in no particular violent criminal behavior, just trying to go through a door, essentially. You know, you can push the person back when they're fucking 5'0", and get shot while unarmed, and there were no riots that resulted from it. Nobody burned Wendy's. Nobody looted TVs from Walmart. It's a miracle, a January miracle. That's what I think of when I think of January 6th. Look, we've got corroboration from the FBI that at least 90% of the people that were detained in connection with this never planned to enter the building, had no violent intent, and weren't organized in any way. That's not an insurrection, because that leaves you with like less than 100 individuals that you can account for that were organized. And they left their weapons outside. Well, they claimed they were their weapons. There were an awful lot of glowing ones there that day, including several that were in open communication at the time with people that entered the Capitol. That's not a conspiracy at all, though. That's perfectly rational and normal, and you shouldn't look into it. That's why the January 6th committee, led by House Democrats and Pelosi, won't disclose much of the information that they've got, because they know that they would no longer be able to try to make January 6th the next 9/11. Now, before I continue, link in the description and down below in a pinned comment if you're on YouTube to a Substack article I did yesterday ahead of January 6th explaining my thoughts about it in brief. There are a lot of people, and the engagement's actually extremely high on the Substack articles. A lot of people, I guess, like the journalistic entries, and I think it's because it's scripted. Most of the time, I do off the hook. I don't even have notes next to me when I'm doing these videos. The Substack articles, of course, I've linked it. It's all edited, and I made sure the spelling's proper and there's no mistakes or anything. Some people, I guess, like that more dry delivery, so have at it. I promise if you sign up for email alerts, which you should there, almost 5,000 people have, I won't flood your email inbox. It'll be less than a post a week, generally speaking. I did 2 in a row this time, but that's because of January 6th. Okay, if there's really, really major news, I won't be able to put it off. So yes, you should take that link. Now, again, the FBI confirmed after its initial reporting on January 6th, that the majority of the people there were not organized. They weren't Proud Boys, they weren't Oath Keepers, they weren't part of any group. They were simply there to watch Trump speak. Here's what people watching CNN saw on January 6th. With lots of lurid commentary attendant, and they've continued it to this day. Literally a year later, they're still harping on it as though it was worse than 9/11. I'll get into Biden's comments on that because they're really hilarious as well. Of course, Pearl Harbor connection aside. What you saw was Molotovs and people beating the cops down and trying to kill the representatives and senators and stuff. And AOC was, she was in another building across the block, hundreds of yards away, but she was terrified too, and it reminded her of sexual assault, and she's make sure to tell people this frequently because she's grandstanding. And that's really what this has devolved into. What I saw on January 6th was that a very, very large group of people went to see Trump speak, and they did. A portion of them, maybe half or so, actually marched to the Capitol. Not even everyone that was there took his advice, which was march to the Capitol and let yourselves be heard. Now, in order for this to be an insurrection, several things need to be true. It needs to be organized, and it needs to have some actual capability to cause widespread violence. Neither of these things were true, because that splinter group off the initial group, maybe 10, 12,000 people, sizable. How many actually entered the Capitol? A couple thousand. If 90% of them, as the FBI states, or possibly more, weren't organized, how many people does that leave you with? Is that an insurrection force? Is that a force capable of underwhelming the military complex around the D.C. area? Why, by the way, did the government not ensure there was more security inside of the building? I don't know. Why were there only a handful of regular guards with their Glocks? Why weren't there a handful of people on standby? Oh, that's right. There were. Insurrection claims aside, apparently there were heavily armed commandos on some of the nearby roofs that could have taken care of the problem very easily. Apparently, they didn't think that there was enough of a risk in the situation to do so. Probably because when they looked at the crowd, they observed that most of these people were not being violent. They were taking selfies. When they got into the Capitol, they took selfies, they posed with the lectern, and did stupid shit, which has resulted in numerous criminal penalties. But by and large, it's not felonies, it's not significant crimes, it's not violent crimes, it's trespass, minor vandalism, breaking and entering in some cases, simple assault without any weapon involved. These are misdemeanors. This is not an insurrection. Add to this fact, this is now known as well, there were pickup trucks with pipe bombs and guns and all sorts of other goods outside of the building. Let me put myself in the mind of an insurrectionary. Now, I have successfully just watched thousands of people enter the Capitol. The building's overwhelmed. Even if all the guards opened fire and every bullet shot someone in the head, it would be a fraction of the crowd. Now, let alone those people are being nonviolent, but they're there. They're providing cover for whatever I'm doing. I'm an insurrectionist. I genuinely am crazy, and I think that I can overturn the election results, honk honk, of the asterisk administration, keep them from being incoming, and Trump will become emperor, and all of these other hyperbolic bullshit things that you heard from CNN and MSNBC and will for the next 24 hours. Why do I leave my weapons outside? The building's been underwhelmed. A casual stroll through the building will show me, hey, there's a handful of guards and a single goddamn half-broken down door in between me and hundreds of representatives. I can go out to the car, I can grab my shit, and I can blow it all to hell. I can literally kill off half of the legislature. Did anybody attempt to do this? No. Why not? I thought it was an insurrection. It's a pretty lame goddamn insurrection. The only person that even was killed that day was Ashli Babbitt. She was the only person willfully killed that day. You've heard increasingly over time death tolls regarding January 6th. Well, 4 people died. Oh, now it's 6. No. It was one person, Ashli Babbitt. That was the only person that was killed that day. There was a cop that died attendant to that day. Originally, they said that they bashed his head in with a fire extinguisher. Then they said they crushed him in the door. Turns out he just had a fucking heart attack because of the stress. I'm sorry, but if you get stressed in a situation, other people are not responsible for your death. If you go on a roller coaster and die of a stroke, it doesn't mean that the person who pressed the lever killed you. You died of stress. Several cops killed themselves shortly thereafter. They're always tabulated in these results. But that's not being killed. They killed themselves, and they shot themselves, or drank a liquefied aspirin or something. One person, Ashli Babbitt, an unarmed female, 5'0" with a MAGA hat on, and that's why there's no Remembrance Day for her. Meanwhile, fentanyl, I loved the other day, ahead of January 6th. Of course, they wanted to get out ahead of the horse here. They put out a bunch of stink pieces. Well, here's the actual backstory of Ashli Babbitt. Some people are trying to claim that she was a victim, but the truth is she was a radical, an extremist. Here's her with a MAGA hat. She made posts praising Trump. That's extremism these days. By the way, I'm sure that this video will be labeled extremist by leftoids as well. And of course, the legacy media, they hate to see someone countermand their entire stupid idea with regards to January 6th. They make their stink pieces. How many of these people in the legacy media have made a piece on the troubled past of Fentanyl Floyd? The troubled who held a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach? The troubled past of Jacob Blake? No, they're victims. They're memorials to them. You've got George Floyd goddamn statues in the United States now. But Ashli Babbitt, two things were wrong about her. Well, three. First, she had a MAGA hat on. Secondly, her skin color was wrong. That's really what it boils down to. And number three, the neoliberal legacy media is not going to celebrate her because the people that they want in power, globalists, don't like those movements and would rather render them scary, but there was no insurrection. They will label it that for opportunistic reasons to try to browbeat people and try to turn it into another 9/11. And that's where I would leave off. Remember Biden, when he was summing up the insurrection, the really terrible violence that day that AOC was so concerned about from across the street. He said it was the worst attack on American democracy since Pearl Harbor, completely skipping over an event in which 3,000 Americans died and several $billion in damage were done. I would compare it, if I wanted to compare it to the most recent events, I'd compare it to the George Floyd riots and say it pales in comparison. Yeah, a couple dozen people dead and $2 billion plus in damage because of the George Floyd race riots. Versus a few $1 million in topical damage and one person dead, which was one of the rioters at the Capitol on January 6th. The truth is that the real threat to democracy is this kind of propaganda attempting to hold up this event artificially and hyperbolically as being having massive meaning and using it to try to push Universal Voting Rights Act, federalization of elections. We need more security for the Capitol. It's still militarized. It's interesting how the security there never went away. The fence may have been taken down, but they have surrounded themselves with soldiers. Here's the why. When the George Floyd riots happened, where'd they happen? Inner city. Politicians don't live in the inner city. Maybe small town politicians, but the people in D.C., they don't. They don't live in the outer D.C. area. They don't live in the Brownstone district. Pundits, 6-7 figures, they don't live in Kenosha. They live in penthouses with private security or gated communities and country clubs and mansions. They have their own guards or at least sentries in their communities. They have houses that have all sorts of security systems, and they live far away from the uproar of any potential riots because riots tend to go to high concentration areas because then you get seen more. There's more people there. They don't have to worry about it. But what happened on January 6th is that it happened right in the Capitol Mall. Now they try to say, well, it's significant. This is the people's house, and this is the very core of American culture, and star-spangled apple pie bullshit. But that's not why they were concerned. It's because all their Washington bureaus are in the area. They were afraid because the politicians were the ones that were there. They had to hear people shouting angrily for once, as opposed to some dude who manages a 7-Eleven. They don't care about him. They don't give a shit if those communities burn. In fact, they love it. It gives them more clickbait. That's about all. Peace out.